Okay, good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm
Well,
doing great. It's a beautiful morning out here.
I think it's fairly nice. I actually haven't been outside yet today, but it's there's a chance it could reach 80 degrees in February and that's really bad for our snowpack and our water supply. It's not good to be 80 in Colorado in February.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, it looks like a nice day out there. Hey, Professor, I wanted to do another unplugged show. And what I mean by unplugged, I think it means something in music. You could tell me. That's a guess, but in politics or my thoughts is it's just kind of like tie off, laid back, loose, maybe non-power, acoustic guitar or something. I don't know what
Yeah.
unplugged means.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, is that all right if we just have a couple
Yeah.
guys talking? And I didn't publicize today's show at all, so I'm pretty confident that no one's going to join us because I didn't really invite anyone. So, uh,
Okay.
do you mind just having a couple guys talk?
No, absolutely. Sounds great.
Okay, I
What I'm in the
appreciate it. All
mood
right.
for actually, because
Uh,
I've had such a busy week at work in the last couple weeks, so I would actually love to just
just
uh
kind of
yeah,
catch.
let's just just talk it through.
Yeah, as I told you before the show started, I am recording it just in case there's some gem that we think maybe the broader public or humanity in the future might want to look back. And actually, I want to start with that. A couple shows ago, and Bart's welcome to jump in whenever he wants. A couple shows ago, you mentioned when I asked a question, well, how do we know what happened during the Revolutionary War or the Civil War? I mean, how do we actually know that's true? Is that a fact? How can we? Heck, we can't even agree on facts right now in today's world in public policy. It seems like we're arguing about facts, but you go, oh no, we can know. And I think your comment was something to the effect of they wrote letters to themselves, to their loved ones, to their subordinates, to their colleagues, to their they just wrote letters to each other. So we know because we can actually read the letters. Is there a better way to describe history? Can you articulate that?
No, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's just come up in the course of the last week in conversations with colleagues about, um, I'm a big fan of James Weldon Johnson, the intellectual. I mean, it's how do you even begin to describe everything that James Weldon Johnson was? I mean, he was sort of like Theodore Roosevelt, one of these guys who was accomplished in so many fields that you don't know which one to pick to describe him. But one of the things that he was really obsessed with was the power of the written word in order to get inside the mind of someone else. And I was thinking about this. I went to this World War One. I was leading a World War One seminar last weekend in Kansas City. That's why we didn't do a show last week. And one of our readings was a poem of James Weldon Johnson. And I was reflecting on the power of poetry, and he was so uh, Johnson was always so interested in putting people, this is my phrase, behind his eyes. See what I see, feel what I feel, like inhabit my mind. And his great novel, Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, which is just a fantastic novel. I
I
can't
still
recommend.
haven't read that. I've read a half a dozen of your suggested books, but I still have not read that. I'll go to
Well,
a
that's one to read for fun. It's not work. You'll just enjoy it. But the whole, the subversive point of that book was people were going to read it because they were going to be outraged at the idea of a black man passing as white. But he had this other subversive point, which was while you're doing that, you're going to inhabit the mind of a black man and then be shocked by the time you finish the book that you've done that. And, I'm going to sneak in there. And then, so he wrote this poem that we used as in our documents last week about the hyper patriotism of World War One and um, and the dark side of the dark side of racist nationalism. Yeah, but the fact that he did it as a poem was particularly effective because poetry is meant to be read out loud. And there's something that happens when you read a poem out loud where you're not only inhabiting the mind, but it's also inhabiting your body. And it, the fact that it rhymes also means that the ideas tend to stick with you.
Hmm.
And I wonder, as we've been denigrating the humanities for years and years and years and saying how worthless they are, I I don't think it's a coincidence that w we lack empathy as we read less, as we read fewer poems out loud. At any rate, roundabout way of saying, uh, I think it's particularly effective to engage in empathy through reading and connecting with the past, and it's kind of magical that it's possible. It seems, it's one of those everyday miracles that we just overlook.
So you're saying we can actually, to understand history, and it was a roundabout way, but it was a meaningful. That was nice. I like that. You're in order to understand about history, we should try to be inside the person in their time, seeing what they're seeing, and then that way we can better understand the facts.
Yeah, and we always joke about how much I read Calvin Coolidge's autobiography, but one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to Coolidge and Eisenhower in particular is that the more you study Coolidge and Eisenhower, you realize this is a wonderful place to be. Inhabiting their minds is it's just nice. And in a way, you're almost rewiring your brain to I can't say. Um, well, it does seem like the more you study some of the people, you can almost predict um, what they would think about a particular issue.
Even into the future, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of a magical thing that the human brain can do. The fact that we can connect with somebody from 100 or 200 or 400 years ago, and we get to inhabit their minds and experience the best of what they thought. Um, it, it's actually amazing. We should be in awe of this. It should be one of those things that convinces us that God exists, that we can inhabit the minds of other human beings across time. It's a miracle. It's beautiful.
So there's probably a an academic book answer that maybe you know to this. It's never occurred to me to ask. It seems like right now a lot of writing and whether it's social media writing or whether it's Substack writing or whether it's novellas, essays in magazines, it seems like a lot of writing is performative or it's like trying to cater to a particular audience, or maybe you're trying to get clicks, or maybe you're trying to earn a
Mhm.
living. So it seems like it's not real, or it's
Yeah.
performative. Is that always been true? If there's semblances of truth to that, when Ulysses, or going back thousands of years, was it the original author that wrote it, or did they have script ghostwriters as well? Did they have editors? Did Lincoln, when he wrote the Gettysburg Address, did he have a staff member actually whispering in keywords that would be dramatic? Or was it no? It was just Lincoln sitting there by himself. Anyway, if you can give me any instinct on this, it
Well,
would be.
for Lincoln, it was him. He wrote it himself. And I think for the people who I admire the most, I guess the interesting one for me was always the relationship between Hamilton and Washington. And I've done this in class all the time. Where I say, Hamilton wrote Washington's farewell address. That's not entirely true. Washington was a pretty good writer, and they work together on it. So sometimes when we're hyping up Hamilton, we need to remember Washington did have a brain. You can read his diaries and letters and see um, what was that he was perfectly capable of stringing together some pretty good sentences. once you get too much out of the American experience, though, I don't. I'll just have to punt. I mean, and people like, yeah, the Winston Churchill, obviously, yeah, he wrote his own stuff. He's I love his famous quote about history will be very kind to me, for I intend to write it.
God,
Uh,
that is great. So what was the answer? They did most historical figures that we think about actually wrote a lot of their own stuff, or they
yeah,
collaborate.
absolutely. And one of my favorite books in the last couple of years was Randall Wood's biography of John Quincy Adams. And the reason that book is so good is that um, it, Woods just kind of follows John Quincy Adams' diary. I mean, the guy kept a diary every day of his life. You can't hide who you are when you have a diary that spans your entire life, and it just it becomes this extraordinary story. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah. So, but
Rutherford B. Hayes is another one, by the way. He kept a diary, and it's available online. And I know that everybody's going to slam their computers down and put down their phones and swerve off the road and look up the Rutherford B. Hayes diary. But it really, you do start to get a feel for what these people were like. Um,
are they like us or are they different?
yes, they're like us. You know,
Okay,
I
but they have their jealousies and their anger and their
their pettiness and and that's, gosh, I mean, boy, John Quincy Adams was so human. I mean, in some ways he's better than us, when he's talking about feeling guilty about what he doesn't know when he's trying to get into Harvard, and you realize um, what he knew before he started Harvard would be probably three PhDs today. You know, uh, like the education system was at the highest level was extremely rigorous,
but he
especially.
still felt inadequate, even though he was so competent.
Yeah, because I mean, he's comparing himself to his dad and to some of the brightest minds. But it's also interesting that to me that most of their learning would have been classical learning, knowledge of the Greeks and the Romans and religious traditions and
Reading
philosophy.
Plato and Augustine and
Yeah, but also contemporary political thinkers, a lot of people we've kind of forgotten today because they were famous in Britain for the two in the 1500s, that kind of thing. I
okay,
can't
so
even,
Professor, this has been helpful. I want to use this as a bridge or a transition to talking about some current events because I'm wondering how to judge history when you're living it. What's really is this really an important time, 2026, or is this more like 2022?
yeah,
Is it how do we know how, and so I'm asking a historian,
yeah.
with all the judging history and repeating it, how do we actually know whether we're living in a dramatically important time that we could go one path or another? I kind of think 2026 and through the next half a dozen years is really important, more important than any other 4 or 5 years in our nation's in my life's history, not nation's history, or my life's history. But how do I know that? I read stuff. I read a lot. I How do I know that, Professor, if we're living in a dramatic time or not?
Well,
Part
I
wants to
think
win.
that you would first attach yourself to some eternal truths and make sure of those things.
Well, all men, but all are created equal.
Yeah.
Good. There's a truth. I love that. Do Americans still believe that today?
Yeah, I don't know, but I would say Coolidge, when he said in that famous, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of his 150th anniversary of the Declaration, uh, and when he says, "If all men are created equal, that is final." If all just governments derived their powers from the consent of the governed, that is final. And no progress can be made beyond these propositions. All we can do is try to keep applying them and knowing that we're going to fail and that we're going to peacefully try to do better next year, you know. Uh, and if you attach yourself to those things just like a rock, I
Well,
mean,
good. You like what I did. I
yeah,
interrupted
yeah,
you
I
with
think it's
a
really important. Yeah. So, and you just say, this is how I can know if something that is eternally important is happening and where, I mean, as Lincoln said in the concluded in his apple of gold, so that we may act, we must know the points of danger. You know, that you have to get your head straight first so that you will know, okay, I'm going to ignore this, but this is important and I will not budge. You know, this is where the line is. And we've talked about this in previous episodes too. You know, knowing where that line is when you go from holding a sign to grabbing a bullhorn and getting on the top of your house, you know.
Well, so Professor, we will talk more about that because that's kind of what I've been machinating about. It's interesting how we got to there without me asking that question. You kind of got us to where I wanted to get to. But before that, Bart, weigh in whatever way you went, comment or questions. Jump in.
Okay, here's a comment and a question. You know, Stephen, at the beginning of this, you talked a little bit about your World War One seminar you did a few weeks ago,
Yeah,
and I think that's interesting because I don't know, in the last month or so, I've been watching weird stuff on television, you know, on Netflix and stuff, and
yeah,
I had no idea what bad decision makers the European leaders were leading up to World War One. I mean, it's not just they were profoundly horrible. And it's not that they were horrible people. It's just when you look back at the historical record, like, well, you know, Kaiser Wilhelm II, as near as I can figure it out, was actually Queen Victoria's grandson.
yes,
So he was leading a war against his first cousins.
yeah,
And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, oh my God, seriously? And he
yeah,
seriously thought that was a good thing to do. I think, you know, and we can go through all of those leaders. I don't want to do that because it's
yeah.
too much of a deep dive.
No,
But
no,
what,
but I think I can tie it back because the
yeah.
reason why that happens is because of bad fundamental assumptions. They
Mm-hmm.
believed in Darwinism, that Darwinism, survival of the fittest, applied to nations, and that if you didn't have a nation connected to an ethnicity that was growing and conquering, that you were going to fail. And
Okay, now I got to interrupt.
yeah,
Remember your thought, Professor, where you're going to go because this is important. So you got it. What
yep.
you're going to, and I'm interrupting. We have that in the Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, today. What you just
Right.
said, what Bart alluded
Mm-hmm.
to, and he is advocating that on television, on interviews. He's screaming at us the importance of us to dominate, to wipe out other nations, or to be completely. The only thing that matters is power. That's happening today.
Yes.
Well, what the? Well, I don't like cursing. I love cursing, but not on a
Yeah.
podcast. Really?
Yes.
Oh,
It
but isn't that a red line? Don't we all? I don't stand out with the sign. Stephen Miller is really dangerous. I mean,
well, if Stephen Miller was the um the authoritarian leader of the dictatorship called the United States of America,
isn't he?
no.
Okay, you sure? Sorry.
Yes.
I
Uh,
no, but I want people 100 years from now to dig up this video and go, wait, who that John guy asking that professor guy? John's right. It actually was happening right in front of our eyes, and we didn't realize it.
right.
Stephen's leading this on these issues. It's not President Trump. Stephen Miller is leading these issues.
But he's limited in that he is one advisor who does have a broad portfolio and he can do a lot of damage. And he is absolutely testing the limits of, and I would say, trying to destroy the Enlightenment basis of the United States government and replace it with a he is fundamentally a anti-enlightenment.
Okay,
And
translate enlightenment. I studied
I just
philosophy
mean
as a
that
minor.
well, I don't want to use the word liberal because it gets people confused,
Yeah, don't
but
translate that either. Yeah.
yeah, but what we mean is that the United States of America was founded on Enlightenment ideals.
Well, but use a
It's
different word. What?
it founded on the ideals that all men are created equal, that we
Okay,
should
thank
have rule of law, that we should have a pluralistic society, that we don't
you.
just have
Use a
one
different word
right, we have many
besides
rights.
pluralistic. Use a different word. No
That
one
you don't
understands that.
have one right, you have many rights.
Thank you.
And that the purpose of government is to negotiate between your many rights that you have as an individual. And there are people within the Trump administration who are fundamentally hostile to that idea. They believe in the group exercise of power. Uh,
Okay, now to do a preview, I don't think a lot of people are going to watch this show, but in case they do, we're interviewing Alex Cranberg again next week. Alex, I don't know how tied in and how close he is to the Trump administration. My instinct is he's really close. I mean, like a half a degree of separation. He knows, I know two cabinet members. Heck, if I know two cabinet members, he's way closer than I am to those two cabinet members. And I bet he knows a lot more than just two. Alex is right in there. I don't know if he's top 100 or top 1,000 most important people tied in with the Trump administration. He is right in there, Professor. And we're interviewing him for the second time a year and a half later before Trump gets elected next week. And I think he is a proponent of everything we're talking about, including Stephen Miller's philosophy. So I don't mean to I don't mean to shoot him down before we even interview him, but
no, I would just say based at least unless he's fundamentally a different person than he was when we interviewed him 2 years ago. I would never put Alex Cranberg in the same breath as Stephen Miller.
I
Uh,
love that. Good. But I'm telling you, he sure seems to be advocating every aspect of the Trump
Well,
administration.
and this is the part that makes everybody upset is when I also say that, if you ask me, is Steve Miller a gargoyle? The answer is yes. But, not everyone who works in the Trump administration is evil.
Love
And
that.
there are a lot of good people. And I would even say
Agreed.
I know good people who will often reassure me because they'll say, "Look, I know President Trump, and yeah, he does this stuff, but you don't know him. He's really you would like him if you met him, and you wouldn't be saying this stuff about him if you spent a little bit of time with him behind closed doors." And I just have to say, like, yes, but I do have to judge him based on what he says publicly. You know, I would leave open a door, and also there are a lot of ideas that if I were to, and this is this, I would say, I said this when we talked to, I don't know if this was public last time we talked to Alex, but I chatted with him privately as well. So and I don't think I'm revealing any confidences, but I was looking at, and he said, well, don't we agree on, you know, 11 out of these 13 things? And I said, yes, we do. you know, but you need to understand that these last two things are a no-go for me. And uh, maybe you haven't thought through the implication of what you're doing when you associate yourself with these last two ideas, because that's where you're no longer you don't get to claim to be patriotic anymore. And uh, and he is of the view, and a lot of people are, well, why shouldn't I side with somebody who's with me on 11 out of 13 of these issues? Um,
Uh,
and
you know,
and there are a lot of people in that, a lot of normal people don't insist upon this, strict intellectual adherence to these ideas because they say, I basically agree with them, and because they haven't figured out where that red line is. Or they say, but isn't it
So,
possible, or isn't it true, or, doesn't he sort of have a point? And they'll say something that sounds reasonable, like, but we should have control of our borders, shouldn't we? I'll say, yeah, but you can get control of your borders without saying we need to destroy the Constitution of the United States. You can
yeah.
be for border
Mhm.
security and rule of law. Those are not mutually exclusive. But that's not how most normal people approach political issues. Um,
Oh, Professor, I haven't written this essay yet, but I'm going to. At a certain point, your commercial airline pilot, shouldn't be drunk on the job. I know I saw the movie. It was actually a good movie if you haven't seen the guy that was drunk on the job. And it turned out okay because he was fearless. But that was a great movie if you remember what it was. You should
I
watch
don't,
that. But you shouldn't have your average commercial pilot be drunk on the job. You
yeah,
shouldn't have your bartender be poisoning the drinks. You shouldn't have your priest be encouraging sin or doing sin himself. I mean, there's lots of like lines that in that job and that sorry you can't be president if you don't swear to uphold the Constitution. It's just
yeah,
all these other things are great, maybe, or good, or mixed. But no, you're ineligible to serve if you're willing to
right.
do it January 2021.
Well, I
It's
felt that very keenly in that I knew some people who were, like, let's say, associated with the world of Claremont, and they're kind of cranks. But in the world of intellectuals, we need some people who are a little bit of a crank to sort of push the boundaries.
push
And
us
I
one
don't
way
have
or
a
the other.
problem with them as long as they're like writing the odd article for Claremont. The problem is when when somebody like Stephen Miller tries to just implement that stuff as policy, it's like, no, what are you doing? This was an insane thing written by somebody who's kind of nutty. Like and you should not have taken the three crazy things out of this article. You should have thought, okay, well, this is where he's pushing the limits, and maybe there's some truth to some of these arguments, and this is how it tests um, some of our other assumptions. But you don't just take those nutty ideas and turn them into national policy. That's also, ultimately it's our pluralism, the idea that we have many people and many institutions that are counteracting the desires of these people that ultimately that is frustrating them, making it impossible. And also, when you live in a fantasy land, you can order the deportation of millions of people, but if you only have 50,000 rooms to put them in, you just can't do it. You can,
But even if you spend billions and get to 150,000 rooms,
yeah,
it's still not. Yeah,
and then and you can say we need deportation proceedings for these people, but we don't have enough judges, and there aren't enough hours in the day, and they don't have enough lawyers. So, wishing, you, I don't know, wishing for it to rain unicorn tears from, clown rainbows doesn't make it so. And
Okay, can I bring
yeah, yeah, Bart.
um just to connect this to like real life things that are going on right now, because I totally understand exactly what you're saying. But how can people like us, let's just say normal people, okay, who are not in power, John and I kind of were at one time, but we're not right now. How do we talk to normal people about what you're talking about now? Because
Hmm.
here's the problem. Right now, if you did a public opinion poll and you asked, I don't know, people, do you believe in strong immigration enforcement? I bet 70% of them would say yes.
yep,
Mhm.
agreed.
So if we talk about it in the terms that you were just talking about it, Stephen, people are going to go, well, I'm not going to vote for you or anybody you support. So how do we make it how do we make this real for people? You know, there are innocent people who are dying because of the stuff that you and John were just talking about. You know, we've got immigration officers who, for some reason, are just killing people. And we have a whole bunch of people. I don't know how many people in immigration custody are actually dying right now because no one knows.
Yeah, and one assumes that this is all, well, not one assumes, this is already bumping up against um, legal reality, and it is working itself out. But to your larger question of how do you do this, I really think uh, that it can only be done one person at a time, and really one child at a time.
What do you mean? What do you mean this can be done?
I mean, all right. I mean, the seminar I conducted last weekend, it's the people in one sense, or in many ways, doing these seminars, just to tell you what they're like, they bring together high school teachers from all over the country. And these are usually the best human beings you could possibly imagine.
Is this Teach for America or
Yeah,
something else?
teaching American history. I
Okay.
mean, if you're a rich person and you want to give your money to something, give it to teaching American history because they do so much to leverage every dollar. Rich people always have a hard time knowing what to do with their money, and boy, if you're looking for somebody to donate to, uh, and you're a rich person out there, like, uh, I just can't believe how much good work they do with so little money. They really do an amazing job of multiplying the effects of um, really changing lives. So they bring together teachers who apply. They have to apply to this program, and then we go somewhere and we read primary sources for 3 days. And usually visit some historic site or not. And they do 1 day seminars, but the 3 day seminars are really fantastic because all we do is we read primary sources. And what you find out is that the best high school history teachers in America have never been taught the story of America.
Mm.
You know, because it's the way we teach history has been so degraded at every level of education that it's taught in units. And it's almost the study of history has become for most teachers like trying to memorize pi, which means it's a disjointed series of random, completely unrelated things required by the state. In order to pass political muster makes no sense. You know, you'll sit there and go, I haven't, you'll say, I know these are the words that I'm supposed to say, but I still have no answer for why did the United States enter World War One?
It's kind of
Like you
it's kind
can't
of
answer just fundamental questions about America
is
the way
this an
we do
okay
history.
is this an okay analogy, Professor? Have you studied a foreign language?
Yes.
Yeah, I've done Spanish and German, and
Yeah.
a lot of the ways we teach it, it's disjointed. Where you go through a couple of years of it, and you have no idea how to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
You got to go speak Spanish in Mexico or somewhere. So you learn stuff, but it doesn't mean anything, and you can't react to it when you're engaged in. Is that a good
Yeah,
analogy?
absolutely. And so what happens at these seminars, boy, I'm really plugging t teaching American history, but it is the answer to your question, I think, which is you bring people together and they study it seriously, and then they take that stuff back into their classrooms. And there's no way everybody wants there to be some national magic wand or something. You can't do it. There are certain things in the human experience that you just can't speed up. I used to sit at home and wish, oh, I wish I could just sleep on this book. And then somehow like download it into my brain. I mean, this is the dream of what AI. I don't need to know anything. I can just, say, oh, The Conservative Sensibility by George Will, uh, give me the AI summary of this, but that doesn't do it.
No.
You have to actually read it, and that takes time. And we want all this stuff to be fast, but it isn't fast. The thing that conservatives used to get right is the importance of culture, and culture has to be done slowly. And we have plenty of time.
Mm.
That's the other thing. Everybody's like, "Oh, we don't have time. We're so busy." Not true at all. Like, show me your phone. Show me how much time you spend scrolling on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
and I will replace that with, I'll cut it in half.
So,
And
Professor, 100 years ago, or 200, or 500, or 2,000 years ago, people had to spend a lot more time out in the fields trying to figure out how to get food, whether hunting or growing it, right? I mean,
yeah,
a
and
lot
yet
more time
somehow
being.
they still had time to write thousands of words, and they still had time to engage in, days, if not hours, of religious activities. I mean, no, we have plenty of time. Um, it's, I mean, I say this as somebody who just went through a week where every hour of my day was scheduled, but you know,
Yeah.
but it's not like that every week. But there's no way to speed up this process. We don't get to um, we don't get and the people who are, and it has to be done because it's so easy to tear things down. It's really hard to build things, and you have to know things in order to build things. And so, yeah, of course, it's really easy for baby Huey and the bull raging through the china shop.
I don't know Baby Huey. I'm sorry. What's Baby Huey?
Oh, he's just a big dumb baby who breaks things.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, I didn't know.
Uh,
Baby
you
Huey. Yeah.
know, um, but that's easy. But building these institutions, it has to be done slowly. And I think, there are some glimmers of hope. A lot of the people we've had on this show over the years are now running centers at state universities now that have all popped up, these centers for civic education. Um, and maybe that's the first step towards getting real civic education back in our education system. But
Okay. So, Professor, this has been a delight. Thank you, a delight. Uh, but I'm wondering whether I've lost my script, or maybe I haven't. You're saying that in order to accomplish significant public policy in the United States today, our show, how to take it in perspective, sometimes we just got to slow down and think through it and work harder or understand deeper history, not just react to the latest thing of the day. It's hard work because sometimes you just got to pause and
yeah,
reflect.
in fact, it's funny. I was thinking about going back. I did this last time in the last Trump administration, like getting my paper subscription to the Wall Street Journal again,
Mm-hmm.
because I was feeling like this morning because I just heard that like China has resumed nuclear testing. And I thought, this is really like big news, and it's on, and it's nobody's covering it.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the middle of immigration stuff and Epstein, and like there are still real things happening in the world, and because of the crazy mob way we consume news, stuff like that just gets buried, and you forget
Okay.
that the stuff on page 8 of the Wall Street Journal is the really important news.
So, Professor, how does a deep conversation about original works or even original letter, I mean the direct pen and paper of somebody's thoughts, how can that exist in today of with infinite amount of resource on our phone?
Yeah.
Just so bombarded with everything that we really truly. I know you're saying put down your phone.
Yeah,
Well,
put down
fine.
your phone and get some sleep.
Yeah, I know, but
Yes.
the people are excited by the phone, and it's more important than sleep. There's something going on. Their friends saying something about something. How do we win on this? To be deep thinkers, to be
Well, I mean, here's the depressing answer. Sometimes we don't. I
love it.
mean, I have to be honest, like you're right. There's nothing in the world. Every think about every resource of the wealthiest people who have ever lived are all concentrated in one task, which is to get you to never put your phone down. Never. I mean, they are all dedicated to grabbing your eyes and keeping them staring at their content that is coming through that device.
So, Professor, I'm not a big Freudian, but Freud has some points that if there's a dancing beauty versus Plato, and I know you're not a fan of Plato, but Aristotle. Well, no, you're Lincoln or Washington.
Yeah,
Most people are going to go to the dancing beauty.
of course, 100%.
Well, so we're going to lose.
I mean, we're not going to lose, but well, not everybody will. But why did you run instead of stare at your phone? The thing is, and this is something our founders understood. We all have the back of our brain, the part of us that is d capable of being distracted. And if you're not paying attention, you'll eat junk food and drink milkshakes and eat ice cream every night. Uh, but we're also human beings. We also have the front of our brain too. And with the front of your brain, you can say, I'm not going to eat ice cream every night. I'm not going to have a milkshake every day for lunch. And just the same way, I mean, a couple of the things that I've done that have really changed my life in the past year is number one, when I come home, I plug in my phone and I treat it like it's a landline. If I want to see it, I have to go into the room where it's plugged in and look at it. And then I have to set it down and then go back to whatever else I'm doing.
Man, that's old school. That's funny. Have you
And
have you ever heard that, or is that your own invention?
I just invented that because
Yeah.
it started with it started with the other thing that I did that is unrelated, which is I got one of those alarm clocks that wakes you up with light instead of sound. And then again, this is an Arthur Brooks thing. Don't sleep with your phone in your room. And I just sort of decided to take it a step further and just say, okay, well, I'm going to treat my phone like it's a landline. And
Yeah. Fascinating.
but those two things, it's amazing how much more productive I am.
I love that.
I
So
gain back 6 hours of my life a day, it seems like.
I believe you. So
Yeah.
I want to transition one more time before we draw this to a close. Bart, do you want to jump in on anything we've been talking about?
No, no. Let's
Right.
transition to your next area.
Okay. So Professor, you have given, and I know this is unfair to have such a weighty topic in just, I don't know, 15, 30 minutes. But all the multitude of things that we as citizens should be potentially getting it from our phone, or how do we get in, watching news, except the 24-hour news is just 24 hours. Yikes. To be a good citizen in America today, I'm I don't even want to say bipolar because I don't mean that in a clinical sense. I vacillate back and forth between, oh my God, this is crisis, or I don't know, this is important. Maybe I'm not sure it's even important. It's wacky, but oh, crisis, oh, weird, oh, important, oh yeah. And I'm not bipolar, I don't think. Um, but I do vacillate because half my friends, and that's an exaggeration, a tenth of my friends are crazy. We are in a fascist state today. It happened a year ago. We are in a fascist state, all blinking horns, everything's chaos. We must stop this. We must hate everybody who doesn't believe that it's a fact. And then another 10%, are going, you guys are nuts. Everything is just fine. We have to do a correction of what's happened. You guys are just completely off your rockers. And I try not to pay attention to those 10 and 10. I try to totally ignore them. But I do try to pay attention to the next 5 or 10 next to adjacent to those 10. Normal people that are vacillating back and forth. You, Professor, have added stress to my life. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think in a good way. You've added stress to my life. It was 2 weeks ago that you went through a litany of is our current president an American? And you went through no. You, to me, that was interesting, but it also caused this huge cognitive dissonance in from my earliest times as a Cub Scout, not a Boy Scout, a Cub Scout. In like, I think it was 3 fingers, maybe 2, I can't remember. I mean, little tiny oath and pledge and decency and honor and institutions and then my soccer coach and then my Episcopalian faith and my parents, how societies run and how I should behave. And when I screw up, and I've screwed up a lot, Professor, I've done a lot of silly stuff and bad stuff. And my whole life is you could look at it and say sin, mistake, horrible. Or you could look at it and go, yeah, but he tried harder and did well. And then he did that, this different version. But I'm looking at this and going, oh my God, Professor Tootle answered 100%, not an exception, that President Trump is not an American. And we've already talked about Stephen Miller, his number 2 aide. Maybe his chief of staff is okay. But I have my red light. I'm going, okay, we've got to behave differently. As good patriotic citizens, we shouldn't be not paying attention to what's going on. This is really dangerous territory. So I'm pondering in real life, Professor, whether I, Mr. Boy Scout, political science, law degree, elected official, Republican thing, founder of a city, if I am willing to engage in civil disobedience, and whether I'm willing to be put in jail for a night, because I'm never going to hit a cop ever. That's just not my shtick. I don't do that. But I sure could be handcuffed and put in jail. And do I want to do that to my wife? I am in real life pondering where that red line is, where I should make a difference as a citizen, not just say some words on Facebook, but actually stand up and say no. Will you give me and anyone like me, and because I actually think I'm in the center right, I'm not one of those 10% or even adjacent to the 10%. I look at my crazy liberal friends and think they're crazy. Nice people, but crazy. I look at my Trumpian friends, nice people, but crazy. I think there's a whole swath of us in the middle, and I'm on the center right of that middle, that am pretty disappointed on where we are right now in America and want to do something different and want us to move towards doing something different. And you are creating stress in my life saying I'm not doing enough, because when I hear you speak, oh, that means something, Professor. You're the historian. And if I don't pay attention, I'm not listening. So anyway, will you give some guidance to people like me? And then Bart, you're welcome to add in once he responds.
Well, I've got some maybe weird advice for you, which
Love
is
that.
I think
you're on your phone and go running. I get it.
No, it's not that. I just think that you are you're you're holding a little too tightly to your some of your worldly values.
Well, what I don't know. I'm sticking with those principles, Professor.
And not
Boy
thinking
Scouts and
about the
soccer and
eternal.
church, those are all
I
valuable.
don't think it's that big of a deal to get arrested.
Oh, okay, I get you. Okay,
My point is that, like, yes, if you feel like you should engage in civil disobedience, go do it.
okay, that's
Be
an interesting
peaceful,
point. I'm
be
surprised.
respectful, but get arrested. Like, who
Yeah.
cares? What do you, I mean, like, what we should, and part of this is I've been reading a book I've been buying for everybody lately, the On the Christian Life by John Calvin. It's a section of the Institutes of the Christian Religion so I mean, you talk about Calvinism, right? That John Calvin, right?
Yeah.
There's a translation of maybe, his some of his most important work. And I think I've bought 6 copies of it to give away over the past, month. Um, but one of the things that I like in it is how he describes how we're supposed to approach this world and this life, which is to say, yes, we should be thinking about heaven, but we shouldn't hate this world. We
No,
are meant to delight in this world.
love that.
But and but don't, I'm trying to paraphrase it, but like, don't hold this world, don't confuse this world with the eternal. It's your eternal soul. That's what's eternal. And um, if it means that you engage in civil disobedience, think about what is right, you know, and then act according to your conscience and be at peace with that, because we're all going to die someday.
Yeah.
Like in uh, 60 years, we're all going to be dead, you know.
I'm tired now. What do you mean 60? I'm sick.
Well, I just wanted to make sure because I think I'm going to live for a long time. But so I didn't want to say 50 because I could still be
That's
alive.
110, Professor. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I could. I think I always say I think I'm going to make it to like 106.
Wow, really? Wow.
That's my goal, anyways, to make it to 106. Uh,
106.
and But that also means that you know, ashes to ashes, man. We're all going to be gone someday. So the fact that John Brackney spent a night in jail, big deal. Like, what's more important is that you thought about what was the right thing to do. You were peaceful, you were respectful, you did something that your children would be proud of, and your grandchildren, and it was connected to eternal things that are eternally true and eternally good. And if you're doing things that are eternally true and eternally good, you should be at peace.
I love this. I don't know how we got here to this conversation. We started this podcast 5 years ago, in a month, by the way, next 5 years ago, next month. I don't know how we got to that statement, but I love that. Bart, questions or comments on that from the professor?
Yeah, I agree completely, with what Stephen just said, as well as, kind of your sentiments, John. But, one thing that ticks off in the back of my mind, because I'm a lawyer, is I think there are better ways of doing this than getting arrested. And it's funny, I went to a memorial service.
By the way, let me interrupt. Hold on. Before you
go
get
ahead.
to your memorial, I have lived 59 and 9 months of my life totally 100% agreeing with that statement. And this last year of the Trump administration is starting to make me question whether I need to be much more bold than just being John Brackney, who John Brackney is. I am starting to question whether I need to be more assertive and more, and I'm not talking the crazy protester out in this. That's just not me. I don't do that. The last protest I went to cover is before I even got there. I called the cops because that guy was dangerous. He was going to get himself killed or he was going to kill somebody else. I didn't even get to the protest before I was on with 911 telling him what was going on. I'm not a protester. So I can't imagine me engaging law enforcement of any type. I just can't. It's just not me. But
Right.
I'm wondering whether civil disobedience may make a grander point than me having a podcast with Professor Tootle or writing a Substack that gets shared a couple thousand times. I'm wondering whether we're in a time that requires different type of action from thoughtful people. So that's my real question. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Bart, but go to your memorial.
Yeah, no, the thing I was going to describe is I went to this memorial service for a guy who had been a retired judge here in Colorado. who I knew vaguely. I didn't know him that well. But one of the points they made about him, this guy was a black man who had grown up in, I think it was Kansas City, Missouri, in like the 1940s and 1950s. And one of his good friends, who also had been an attorney, he was a retired attorney, got up and spoke, about this guy. And he said, my friend so and so was really interesting because we all participated in the lunch counter protests, but he never got arrested. And I always asked him, why didn't you get arrested? And he said, well, because I think there's a better way to do this. And sure enough, he found a better way to do it. He became a lawyer himself. He became a military lawyer. He represented people in the military. He retired from there. He became like a prosecutor here in Colorado. And then he became a judge. And he thought that was a better way to contribute to society than getting himself arrested. And I'm not saying that there is no time to get yourself arrested, because I think there probably is. Okay. And I think we're damn close to it in our society right now.
You're with me trying to sort this out.
I'm trying to sort it out, John.
Yeah.
You're slightly on the center left, I think. I'm on the center right. I think you're on the center left.
But we're all Americans. And
thank you.
And we're all trying to figure out what's the best thing we can do for our country right now.
Love this.
And again, getting back to John Calvin, and is to believing that your work is your calling, means that we all have different gifts, and life has we're all at different places in life right now. And so the thing that I can do for my country, because I have spent my entire life preparing to be a history professor, is that when I saw this crisis coming, I just said, all right, I'm going to carve out time for my family, and I'm going to carve out time for my faith. And then with what's left over, I am going to
carve out Tootle talks.
Yeah, well, I'm going to teach as much history as I can. And if you think about like the people we've had on, Stephen Knott, Tony Williams, Josh Dunn, John Moser, Andrew Bush, every one of these guys we've all done the same thing. If we felt like we could, if we would felt like doing something else would help, we would.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think back to one of my friends after September 11th. I was all hot, and I was like, I'm going to go enlist. And my friend Bill, who had been in the Army, was like, the Army doesn't need you. Stay in the PhD program. Because I was in the middle of I was 2 years away, 3 years away from finishing my PhD at that point. And but it was hard, but you say, okay, like, I have this skill set. This is my skill set. This is my path. Like, this is where I can do good work. And I can't be everything, and that has to be okay with you. But other people are going to help. And if everybody is helping in the way they can, we need to have some faith in the goodness of the American people, which is, remember what Jeff Bloodworth said, and if I make you depressed every now and then, we got to get Bloodworth back on here to just remind us, don't bet against the American people.
Love that. It's such a great quote. And that really is Bloodworth's quote. I think I've stolen that as my own.
Yeah, but I think he was quoting someone when he said, but I don't remember. Yeah.
Professor, interesting storytelling. I don't know if we're doing a good enough job of that as citizens or humans. I think we do need to know people's background or where they come from and how to weave a tale. I just love how you said
maybe,
that.
But I disagree with that. I think we've done
really? Come on.
Yeah, I think we've done too much
just told a story.
To meet people where they are. No.
Oh, okay.
There is this, I think it's an absolute myth and this is one of the things that Peter Schramm really,
That was a beautiful story. You're proving my point. Peter Schramm proves my point.
okay, I, but there, I say this at work all the time. There's no Harvard version of Federalist One. You know, you are capable of understanding it. Give yourself a little credit. Slow down, put your phone away, you know, uh, look up all the words you don't know, look up all the concepts you don't understand, but you are capable
Love
of
this.
understanding everything you need to understand in order to engage in self-government.
I love this, but how does that counter
But
storytelling?
no, here's the thing that I don't like, which is I think this is where, and I'm sorry if this isn't what you meant, but I think we've done too much of trying to dumb down,
Oh,
simplify,
yes.
Mm.
summarize, give you the shorter version when
Oh,
it
and
is the
performative.
when it's only the longer version that's going to change you.
Yeah.
It's
And so,
something,
yeah,
it's,
yeah, Professor, you did misunderstand. What I misspoke. Uh, What I mean is trying to get to my essence, what is really important. And you were talking about you should teach history and why your friend said you should teach history rather than enlist. I had a very similar experience. I was a county commissioner, and then I started working for my friend who you met, who's deceased now. And my friend and my political mentor, and I think my wife's really patriotic though. I don't can't remember if she urged me to, but my mentor and my best friend saying, John, you got to get out of the army now. You're not suited for it anymore. You've served your country. Thank you. You got to get out.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to become the CEO of the South Metro Chamber. Not, I mean, it would have been illegal for them not to do it, but the answer is you can't have the CEO head off to Iraq again. You have to have somebody who's vested in their community.
Mhm.
So it would be by definition illegal, but no, in real world, you got to have somebody who cares about the community right now, not as a 1 weekend a month, but also now he's gone for 2 years. And I disagreed with them all, but I still ended up doing what they said. So I have that quandary of where I can best serve our nation. And I'm not dissatisfied with my answer because I kind of like my life and where I've been. But I do think I am best suited talking to you today.
Mhm.
However, the world happened and we both got selected to go to the inaugural American Enterprise Institute Leadership Network, and we met each other and engaged with people like Bart and all those professors around the country of different political persuasions. You have some liberal friends, Professor. I mean, most seem to be center right, but you have some pretty liberal friends. I
Yeah.
love what we are doing, and I'm still not sure it's enough.
Well, it'll never be enough. That can't be the standard.
Mm.
Um,
Well, and I think, Stephen, one of your liberal friends actually said that the last time we had him on here. He basically said, actually, it wasn't one of your liberal friends, it was one of the more conservative ones.
okay.
He basically said the conversation is the end game.
Yeah.
And there's never a winner or a loser. There's just a constant, continuous conversation going on. And
Yeah.
that's the win.
That's the win.
Yeah, and but I would say our conversations can be better as long as we keep asking people what they're for instead of what they're against.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Then it forces people to say, okay, what are you for? You can't, because one of the things that's frustrated me, we had a big protest out here the other day, and they were just screaming, and it seemed completely almost out of control or satanic almost. The just the screaming and they were screaming and chanting. It seemed downright fascistic. Um, they were chanting abolish ICE and no one's illegal on stolen land and but in between that just like screaming. And I just asked, what are you for? And nobody had an answer.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was like, okay, do you really want no law enforcement in the United States? And they're like, well, of course not. I was like, well, why are you chanting that?
Right.
I know, like, what is this about? What are you for? Yeah, what is your policy proposal? I don't, there isn't one. The
Mhm.
Democrats have proposed nothing.
Right.
Like, so
Oh, Professor, but okay, let's take a moderate perspective. People love chanting at football games and football games around the world, but American football games here and football games around the world, they love that chanting and waving and flag waving and we're great and you're bad. We're great, you're bad. I mean, it's a kind of a cultural, instinctual thing, isn't it? We love that. Take it to the extreme. UFC or boxing, or I mean, there's some, they really are using violence to get their way, or take it to the absurd, the wrestling, the fake stuff. They don't care whether it's real or fake. They love that they love that sense of we hate ICE. They like
yeah,
that. It's a good chant. Who cares if it's for something? Humans like being against something. They or being fearful. So they get in their tribe and they hate the other team, don't they?
which is why we need to fight against that instinct. I mean, it's actually one of the things that kept me from religion for many years because I had it so I was so profoundly affected by the story of World War II. You know, like this is one of there are things that no matter how long you study history, you will never stop being horrified by Nazism and communism. Those things are bottomless pits of horror. And but in particular, Nazism is in its own way worse because of what it did in such a short amount of time.
Hmm.
And but because of that, I was so mistrustful of any time I was getting emotionally swept away by a crowd that if I start to feel myself feeling swept away by the emotion of a crowd, I would immediately withdraw and just say, like, I don't want to be a part of this because I want to make sure this isn't turning me into a Nazi. I don't like this. And so, in a way, it kept me maybe from, ever being swept away by faith. I never had that sort of emotional connection with faith that so many other people do. Um, but so I came to my faith very slowly, over decades, and so I would just say it's still an imperfect process. But the example of John Quincy Adams is fantastic in this too, because anytime you study anybody who takes their faith seriously over a lifetime, you realize that it's always unsettled. They never get to they don't you don't get to find out till you're dead. So you learn to live with that uncertainty on a daily basis. But where was I going with this? So I protest movements and chanting and how it feels. I would say I, I have tried to teach my own kids, like, it's okay if it's a pep rally for school, but anything beyond, go Rangers, uh, be careful what you're chanting because most of the time it's not good.
Yeah, I love that. Bart, do you have a instinct on this? Which side do you weigh on? I don't think Professor and I are disagreeing, but give us your thoughts.
I may have too much faith in the American, in I guess maybe in the American people
Love
and
that.
the American legal system
Love
and our
that.
tradition than
Love that.
maybe I should have. But when I've been watching like the US Supreme Court over the last 4 or 5 years, or pretty much the court system, I'm kind of disappointed with my legal colleagues who are bringing the lawsuits that are making it all the way through the process, because it's almost like I'm saying to myself, why in the world is that the case we're actually going to get the Supreme Court to decide?
Yeah.
Because that result is not going to be the one you want. And like right now with the immigration stuff, Justice Kavanaugh, who frankly, I'm not the greatest fan of Justice Kavanaugh. He's a little too conservative for me, but he said something extremely important in one of the immigration cases. He basically said they can't arrest anyone without probable cause. Why are we not litigating some of these arrests on that basis? They seem to be making every other argument but that one.
Yeah.
He's the vote on the Supreme Court you need because he's in the middle. It's like, so why are we arguing about all this other garbage? I mean, now we're arguing. And I'm sorry. I
Don't you
know
think
we
part of
need
this
to.
part is that the legal profession for so many years was dominated by sort of living constitutionalism, and now they don't know how to make those arguments.
Yeah.
They're so steeped in their own tradition, they literally can't. It's like speaking a different language almost.
Yeah, and it's also a political thing. They're
Right.
bringing the cases that the
To get famous.
nonprofit organizations want
Yeah.
them to bring.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
if those cases are losers, why don't you bring the winner?
Yeah.
Even if that's not popular to do it anyway. That's how the civil rights movement in the 1960s eventually won.
Well,
Is they brought so many cases that eventually the courts were like, okay, everyone is created equal.
don't you feel like so many of these advocacy groups are so wedded to pretending to solve a problem that they have stopped the idea of actually solving the problem or making things better is so far in the rear view they don't even have institutional knowledge of it.
Exactly.
And that's across the spectrum, Professor.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
people are performatively fighting these battles, and you wonder whether they actually think, whether they believe what they're arguing for. Yeah.
Yeah, I sometimes, I mean, when I'm dealing with people, I'll sometimes say, is this the room where we're pretending to solve the problem, or is this the room where we're solving the problem? Because if all you want to do is pretend to solve the problem and get your next fundraising email out, then I don't want to be in that room.
Yeah.
But if this is the we're trying to actually make things better room, I'm all in.
Okay. All right, Professor, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask not a hardball question because we've discussed this before, but I want to transition into next week because I think next week will be fairly important because there's three people that I know, and Bart, sorry not to include you on this one. You're welcome to jump in, but I'm not including you on this analogy. There's three people I know: me, you, and Alex. One in 2016 felt so strongly that candidate Trump at that time didn't give a whit about the Constitution. I just knew it. You could just see it. You could listen to him. That I went, if that's the leader of my party that I've served for 32 years and we're selecting him, I'm out. So that's me. Then there's you, who said probably similarly, but I'm going to stay in the party and fight for what I believe in. I think I don't think it's Johnson. I think it's somebody else who you said I get to describe my definitions,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm going to be
James Weldon Johnson again. Yep.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to be me. Thank you. And you can't put that on me. I am being steadfast in my beliefs, and I'm going to fight for them and stay within the party. And then there's Alex. And Alex Cranberg, if I thought he was a fascist, if I thought he was a Nazi, if I thought he was evil, if I thought he was any disparaging thing, I wouldn't be friends with him. I wouldn't want to engage with him. But I like and I admire and I appreciate and I completely disagree with him on President Trump. So the three of us are going to be engaged in a debate next week. Three different paths. I'm out, I'm staying in, and three, Alex, I'm advocating, I'm promoting the president. And we're going to be talking about issues, and back to your point, we're going to be talking about ideals as well, ideals and public policy issues. And I'm going to take this clip, I think, if we can figure that out, and use it to promote next Friday's show. who's right, me, you, or Alex? I mean, three different conservatives approaching how to deal with public policy and how to be good citizens. And I don't, you can see by the way I'm teasing this. I
Well,
think who's right, but how do we think through this as citizens?
I mean, if I didn't think I was right, I wouldn't advocate for my position. So I obviously think I'm right.
You're right.
But
Yeah.
I also would like to think that I hold quite a bit of grace for everybody who's just stumbling through this era trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. And
Love that.
so, as long as I feel like somebody is still patriotic and trying to do the right thing, I'm willing to engage with them because I don't know if what I'm doing is right. I think it is. That's why I'm doing it. But I don't know, and I don't get to know until I die. So, so with that, you have to hold your beliefs. I'm firm in what is right, as God gives us the ability to see the right, as Lincoln says. Um, and I mean, I have a lot of friends who voted for Trump, and I'm capable of distinguishing between people who thought that was the right thing to do and the best of all, their choices. It wasn't my choice, but I understand it. And, to the extent that I remember what we talked about last time with Alex, like I understand why he was where he was. And maybe if I had those similar experiences, and I would have felt the same way. Um, but I do think that there are some long-term negative consequences to the Trump administration that are not worth the costs. And in particular, when, we could have all just voted for Romney, you know, like imagine what the world would be like if things hadn't been so absurd that we accused Romney of being a sexist for his statement binders full of women.
But Professor, that's so recent and it's so absurd from that to where
Yes,
we become
but
every
I
day.
want you to, but we have to understand that. I mean, I agree with Alex Cranberg that when we get to the point where, I mean, I was just watching the news this morning and I was hearing how CNN is describing the economy right now. And I'm old enough to remember how they described when Joe Biden's economy. And you just say, like, you are intellectually dishonest. I don't, this reporter is just engaged in an act of dishonesty. And when you try to claim that Mitt Romney is somehow a sexist for like a a brief, blip of a sentence where he was saying how much
How
was
many women did
promoting
he? Yeah.
women within his administration,
All right.
as if it was the world's greatest gaffe that indicated what a moral monster he was. And remember that combined with the story of him traveling with his dog in a dog carrier strapped
Yeah.
to the top of his car, that
Yeah.
these two things mean that he is cruel. And there was a story like somebody he went to elementary school with accused him of being a bully, and you're like, this is the best you've got.
Yeah.
And yet, that was the picture that was being presented to the American people of what a monster Mitt Romney was.
Right.
And when that is the situation, and this is what my liberal friends don't want to acknowledge,
Yeah.
that's how you get Trump.
Yeah.
Because every reasonable person looks at that and says, blow up the system.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no point in trying.
So, Professor, gosh, are we out of time? I think we are. Yeah, we're out of time in just a minute. Oddly enough, and I want you to pull me back to reality. It occurred to me in the last week that I am so upset about the last month of the Trump administration that now I the pendulum, and I know you don't like the pendulum, but still the overcorrection of the Romney stuff that Trump has done, that now I am starting to say, oh my gosh, we got to blow up the system. And whether it's the Epstein files, or whether it's how we treat Canada, or whether it's the stuff on guns, I mean, I just go through a litany of issues and I go, that's not my position. Why would they be advocating that? I pox on all their houses. Okay, I'm out now too. Let's just elect a whole brand new slate of everybody, because this is not how Americans should be. So now I'm becoming reactionary. I
Well,
don't
as
like.
long as you're not saying get rid of elections. You,
Okay, exactly.
you know,
But he's saying get
saying
rid of elections.
elect different people is different than shoot all of the
But
legislature.
our
I just want
current
to point out
president
that you're
is
still
saying,
in this
Professor,
system.
our current president is saying get rid of re-elections. We don't need a new election if you elect me. Let's federalize elections. Well, where's that red line? Where does a guy like me or you or Bart, how do we say what? That's crazy. If you support that, sorry, we got to vote against you. Sorry, but we got to vote against you. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if there's somebody who's advocating those things, you just simply say, like, this is, you are a bad legislature. You are full of bad ideas and you vote for bad things. Um, but I do like, it's I would just say that I find it crazy that the same people who would say the one big beautiful bill is
Right?
good and the Biden bill is bad. Like I don't know. To me, both of those things are just equally bizarre, um, big government, reward friends, punish enemies, and engage in corruption to reward political friends and punish my enemies. And I mean, and they were both lawless, just in different ways. They're,
Yeah.
they're both pardoning people, just different people.
What's your instinct? I know. Oh gosh, those pardons, both on both sides. Biden's, all that swath of Biden's pardons that Biden did, and the
Although I
swath.
guess Trump just pardoned a bunch of football players. I don't know if you saw the news today,
I did
but
not see that. What did they do?
well, there were various things, but they were all people, football players with convictions, and was it
One of your, as a reminder,
Flacco was one of them, and I want to
as
say
a
Travis
professor,
Henry was another one.
as a reminder, one of your professorial friends, who I've refriended now, but the reason I defriended him because he said I was an ass or something, or an idiot. And I don't like being called an ass or an idiot, but I said we're just going to get to the stages that every new president is going to pardon hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And he goes, "You're an idiot." Well, okay, I'm not friends with you anymore. Anyway, we are getting down a weird path.
I
If we're
think we need to get rid of the
Totally.
party power.
Yeah,
Like
it's just
it needs to be a system where it goes to a panel where it's approved by a bipartisan commission and with the president making the final decision. Like
it's getting
it,
pretty
it
absurd now, isn't
yeah,
it?
we've now, I mean, it's kind of like FDR running for a third term. We
Mhm.
didn't need a rule. Now we do.
Yeah,
Because now we
yeah.
have a president. We've had but it started with the Clintons,
Hmm.
but we've now had Clinton and Obama and Biden and Trump all abuse the pardon power. So that's enough evidence that we need to get rid of it,
Get the
or
Constitution
not get
amendment.
rid of it, but modify it severely to make sure that it really is about pardoning people who have either experienced a miscarriage of justice, made full amends, and apologized and acknowledged what they've done. Um, uh, I'm sure we can come up with. There are a lot of good proposals for modifying the pardon power.
And I've been resistant
I
to
think
that.
all of them are better than the current system.
Yeah, I've been resistant to it because I think it's a good pressure cooker escape valve. If things are getting so bad, at least it's a method for to correct overcorrections. But your point is well made. So we'll let it stand that you win for now. I'm starting to come in your
Well,
direction.
it's like we
Okay.
need it for a president like Lincoln, but unfortunately, we haven't had a Lincoln in a while.
Yeah, fair enough. Professor, next week, I don't know if there'll be fireworks, but there's a chance there could be fireworks.
There won't be any fireworks.
Yeah, there will.
Alex is such a. We've chatted. He's.
No, Professor, we've just talked about the importance of having fireworks or people aren't going to pay attention. And that's the most important thing is that we do performative stuff. We've just talked about this.
I know, but the cure is worse than the disease if we become what we hate just for the clicks and the eyeballs. Like I'd rather, if there are 15 people who are listening to this show, the world is becoming a better place. But if we become part of the problem, then we're not helping. We're
okay.
Actually...
So let me rephrase it then. From 3 weeks ago, you've described that there is zero aspects of President Trump that is an American. To me, that's fireworks. And when I absorbed that, I went, oh my gosh, I need to be doing more. I need to be doing more if my friend and somebody I admire and respect you is saying that none of this is American. Okay, well, I got to be doing a more effective job and however I can do it. Alex will think the exact opposite on every one of those. I think he can particularly engage in every single one of those aspects and saying that's simply not true. So that's what I mean by fireworks. I think he can defend the president in every single way that we ask him to. My question
I think he will concede on every single issue and say the Democrats are worse.
Oh,
that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, that may be true. That may be true. Alex, I'm going to send you this clip and you can ponder it. So
if you want to ask him those questions, I would say ask him those questions, but say
absolutely
without mentioning the Democrats.
Now, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't go there. So, Professor, my final question for you is, I think we're almost uniform. You may have looked at some of the stuff I've done to promote the show, but in 100 and whatever it is, 39 shows, I've never sent you the questions before I ask you them. We just have a conversation among guys. I'm planning on doing that with both you and Alex. I'm not going to send you questions in advance. We're just going to have a conversation about things we believe in. You think that's fair for you and Alex, or do you want me to?
No, I
with you.
I mean, you remember rule number 1, our prime directive is I will do no preparation.
Well, I'm going to tell Alex that as well. And my guess
if
is
he wants to prepare, let him prepare. But
I don't think Alex will prepare. He's a pretty comfortable dude with himself, his career and he's pretty comfortable. And he can think on his feet. So I'm going to make sure he knows.
Also, here's the thing that a lot of smart people have in common is we're perfectly comfortable saying like, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's like, and if I don't know something, I just say, I don't know. And maybe.
So, Professor, I think there's going to be 3 or more issues that are fireworks next Friday. Not dramatic, performative. I don't want to make him look bad or you look bad, or I just think that there's enough schism between conservative philosophies between you and Alex that I hope to suss out some of that where other people that don't think about as much as politics and history as we do can go, oh, they do. Conservatives actually do vigorously disagree on stuff. That's what I mean by fireworks.
Well, I mean, I think the distinction is that I'm an American conservative.
And you're saying he's not?
Insofar as there is a distinction, yes.
I told you there'd be fireworks.
Yeah.
Excellent. We're going to end with that. I'm going to either transcribe this or send it to him so he can ponder that without knowing my questions. Professor, very much appreciate your time. Thanks for doing an Unplugged where I didn't have any questions in advance. Thank you. Bart, any concluding comments?
No, I think this has been great.
Okay.
Great conversation.
And I always feel like I love me some Bart Miller, man. I really value and cherish Bart, and my week is better if we get a little Bart. I really appreciate you, Bart.
All right, thanks for saying that. I appreciate you as well.
I believe you're both sincere in that, but I also believe you bring out the best in people and you look for qualities. And you could probably say that of almost everybody you meet. Your students, I really appreciate the student. It's a good skill set you have, Professor. So thank you for your time. Thanks for being American. Thanks for fighting the right causes. Let's have a good time next week.
All right. See you.
All right. Have a good weekend, you guys.
Hey, guys. Thanks.